Hi, everybody, and welcome to what is actually the last recorded video module and the second last session of the whole course. We have now basically finished all of the, I suppose, the work, the practical work around being a doula, all of the, the prenatal, the antenatal work, the birth work, and then the early postpartum work as well. So really what's left in this course is covering the business end of your work as a doula. And this is really primarily for those of you who ultimately sort of have, I guess, the ambition to start your own business and work in private practice as a doula as well. Now, originally the material for this module was sort of split over 2 weeks, but I've condensed it into one, but I haven't really condensed the amount of information. So I've kind of shoved 2 weeks into one, but because it's an online module, you do have plenty of time to really go through this material. And in reality, when you are sort of in those early stages of registering a business and really starting to put your business together, this actually could take you many months. So I want you to hang on to the materials and the resources that are included in this module, because I hope that in sort of the months to come, possibly even beyond that, you'll be able to look back and refer to these and find some useful links and resources and information that you might need. So don't feel pressured to sort of really plow through this in one go, or maybe what you might want to do is just sort of go through it on a sort of fairly sort of rudimentary level. There are some assignments and things to do to complete specifically for this week, but you'll see as we go through the sort of the bigger work that sort of exists around that really is something that will take time and effort on your part, and again really does come down to what your own personal and professional goals are. This is actually an area that really I'm very interested in and quite passionate about. Prior to my work as I guess as a doula and as a childbirth educator and a trainer, I worked in arts marketing for about 12 years. So very much in the sort of creative arts space, but working in marketing and communication. So I remember when I sort of transitioned into this completely different professional space, I remember thinking, what on earth could I use that would translate in terms of skills from working in the arts to now working in the birth space? And I have to tell you that as somebody who also, as I run my own business, that the skills I was able to bring from my previous work still to this day, every single day, have proved to be absolutely invaluable and have probably saved me thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars over the last decade or so, in terms of what I've been able to do myself and not having to outsource to a marketing person, a web person, a copywriter, etc. There are areas that I have outsourced, and it's really important to know kind of where your skills lie and where you can get help from other people who do it better. So things like graphic design, for example, I'm not a graphic designer, and so I ended up hiring somebody to design my my logo and business identity and so forth. So we'll get into that. So there is, as I said, there's a lot we're going to cover. The first section of this is really kind of the business and the admin-y end of things. And the sort of second half of it is more marketing, social media, branding, all of those sort of things. So I hope you find it interesting. And I hope you find some of the resources, as I said, in the future also helpful to go back and have a look at. So let's get started. So for no particular reason, I have decided just to start with this, and that is just to make a note of doula contracts. So I think it is really, really important that you have a client contract, which both you as a doula and your client sign prior to providing them with any of your services. It's just a really important sort of document to have, which clearly outlines the services you provide, what you do, what you don't do, you know, the what if in case of cancellations, failure to provide service, what if your client has a C-section, you know, backup doulas, payment terms, all of those things upfront, written, signed, agreed upon. There are lots of templates that you can purchase online, and then I guess you can edit them according to your needs. I've written one here. It's Inspired Birth Pro. It's an American company. They have a sort of a doula contract template workbook. I know that Doula Network Australia, DNA, and it's one of the reasons I encourage you to join DNA, is I believe there is a doula contract available for members as well at a small cost. I couldn't, you know, forgive me if I'm incorrect there, but I do know, having seen posts in the past, people asking about contracts, and there are things there available. Look, I wouldn't say that you need to go to, you know, the sort of very considerable expense of having a lawyer go over it, unless you have access to maybe a lawyer in the family or a close friend who's willing to do that kind of pro bono for you, in which case, by all means, go ahead and have somebody really expert in things like contracts kind of look over that. But you know, it's not about reinventing the wheel. I'm sure if you can find yourself a good contract to use as a template, and you can work from there. But yes, that's something I would definitely not be taking on a client, a private paid client, without having a contract in place. Another thing which is going to be very, very helpful for you to set up right from the sort of get-go is to make it as easy as possible for your clients to register either their interest in, you know, a contact form, but then ultimately when they have asked you to be their doula, that you have sort of intake forms or a client registration form, so you can kind of collect some really important information about your clients. There are obviously lots of free form building websites and programs out there which you can do. Probably I would say Google Forms is the easiest. It's you know, it's free, it's very user friendly, and I would say, you know, with most people, you know, I would say when you're starting a business, if, you know, trying to keep your costs down to an absolute minimum is really important. Spend money where you have to spend it. Don't spend it on things that you can do yourself easily, and you don't need a lot of sort of you know, tech savvy or anything to put together something simple like a Google form. So that's what I would recommend. If in time you want to sort of upgrade a little bit, there are companies and websites that also do web building, and they're a little bit more sort of I would say complex, and you know, they allow a bit more flexibility with design and things like that. So I've listed here this company called Macform. I've used this company for many years now. They're very reasonably priced. It's about $60 a year, but that gives you unlimited forms. So for example, if you are offering other services, so if you're doing classes, childbirth classes, yoga classes, pregnancy massage, whatever it might be, and you need to create sort of registration forms or booking forms, or, you know, whatever it might be, contact me forms, this is a very easy to use, very user-friendly website. And one of the great advantages of Macform as well is that it will give you what's called the embed code. So it's a sort of a piece of code which you can copy and paste and put into your website, and then the form actually kind of just magically appears on your website, sort of built into it. It also hosts your forms. So another option is you just send a URL to your client and say, here's my client registration form, link it in an email, for example, and ask people to fill it in. So you don't actually need to host it on a website if you want to have it sort of, private in that sense. So that's just one company. There are many, so you can just sort of Google form building, sites. The other thing also about MacForm and others like it, unlike Google Forms, is you can connect a payment gateway, which you may find very helpful to take things like deposit payments, for example, or full payment for some things. And so you can link it to things like PayPal, Stripe, or a credit card. And that makes it easy for your clients. It means you're getting paid without having to chase money. I use PayPal, and I generally only use it for deposit payments because PayPal do take fees for every transaction. So, and the higher the amount of money going through, the higher that fee. So try and keep those fees to a minimum because it's going to PayPal, not to you. So if it's just a sort of, enough money that it's like, oh yeah, people don't really care about losing $10, but they'll care about losing $100 or $150. So put in, if you want to use that, if it's necessary for you, then something like that could be helpful. I don't use a payment deposit sort of payment gateway for my doula clients because my deposit's 50%. So I just ask them to do a direct transfer to my bank account. But for my childbirth classes, to lock in their spot and confirm their spot in the class, then I use that for a deposit payment only. And then I send a reminder about a week before the class starts, and I include my account details so they can transfer the balance of payment. So that's an EFT, so there's no fees associated with that, and I don't lose any money with the bulk of the payment. So have a think about that. Again, everybody's going to have a different set of needs, but if you're not needing to take money, I say go with Google Forms. It's super easy to set up, and you can send a link to clients, and you're up and running in 10 minutes. One of the best bits of advice I remember getting when I started my business, which was in 2012, and I'd never started a business before that. I had always been an employee, so it was very new to me. And that was about record keeping. So, it's really, really important that from day one, that you keep, first of all, accurate financial records for your business. And that includes if you're earning $50 a month from it. Honestly, even when it's really at that very, very, basic level. The other bit of really important advice I would suggest is that, again, from day dot, once you have a registered business, you can go to your bank and open a separate business account. Shop around and make sure that you're not getting charged, expensive monthly account keeping fees and so forth. Some of the online banks might be a better way to go, like ING, for example. So do a little bit of homework around that and make sure that, especially in the early days when not a lot of money is going in and out of the account, that you're not losing money to ridiculous account keeping fees. But keep your personal finances and your business finances completely separate. Your accountant will love you for it. And I always say start as you mean to go on. So one of the things that you can do is to create just a very simple Excel spreadsheet where you can maintain all your business kind of records. And again, when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of expenses, you don't have a huge amount of money coming in, you don't have complex sort of different streams and channels of income. So it's really simple. And have a look. A fantastic resource I can really highly recommend is to go to the Business Victoria website. They have, you can see I've highlighted it here, and you'll be able to click on it with the PDF version of these slides, the Do Your Own Books, and that will take you through really step-by-step, very simple process on how to maintain accurate records for your business. So I said, when you have a very simple business structure, it's easy peasy. When things do get a little bit more complicated, particularly when more money is coming in on a regular basis, At some point, you may feel that you've kind of outgrown a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I would definitely go off the advice of, either a bookkeeper or an accountant, and let them sort of advise you on how developed your business is and whether you're sort of at that stage that you need to kind of upgrade your record keeping sort of approach. At some point, you may need to sort of, graduate to more professional accounting software. So, I'm sure you've heard of these, and you may in your own, your other life, your own professional life, or and have experience with things like Xero, MYOB, QuickBooks. But in most cases, those software packages come with a monthly subscription fee. So again, unless you need to use it, I wouldn't go there in the beginning. I personally use Xero. My understanding in Australia is Xero is probably the most widely used. You also, if you do have a bookkeeper or an accountant, ask what software they use or they preference before you go and purchase a package, because if you went and purchased MYOB and your accountant says, oh yeah, we tend to use Xero, so do a quick check like that. And again, do you need to use professional services of a bookkeeper or an accountant? I did have an accountant from very early on, because unlike being an employee where your tax is taken out through PAYG, your super is paid in, like everything is automatically done, and you just get your paycheck, and you really don't need to do anything. And doing your tax return is super simple if you're an employee. It can, even with a very simple business, it's not always easy to know what you can deduct, what is it, a legitimate tax expense, etc. So you might not need a bookkeeper, which would again attract a monthly fee for their services, but to pay a good accountant who also understands maybe your area of work. So I would look around and sort of say, hey, do you understand what doulas do and the sort of legitimate expenses we might have? Then it might be worth spending the $300-400 a year just to have somebody knowledgeable who's going to give you the best return possible, and to do your tax return for you. So a couple of things there to think about, but record keeping is really important. Don't wait till you have an established business before you start sort of being very mindful about this. I think some people feel like, oh, I'm really hardly earning any money in my business. Like it's nothing. Why do I need to go to all this trouble? Well, when you set those sort of systems up in place from the get-go, it's very easy to scale up as the business becomes more complex and more money is coming through it. It's harder to do that when you wait until you do have, a fairly, involved business with lots of transactions and lots of expenses and so forth. It gets a bit overwhelming. So I say that's my advice, but that was really good advice given to me a long time ago. So I stick by it. So just a little bit more on bookkeeping here. And, look, I would say that honestly, to begin with, you really probably don't need a bookkeeper, especially, as I said, if you really don't have an awful lot of money going in and out of the business. I didn't hire a bookkeeper until I was about probably 4 or 5 years into the business. So, up until that point, I felt pretty confident managing my own financial records, which, and that's saying something. Maths really was never my strong point at school. So if I could manage it, I reckon anybody could. But eventually, for example, they are very, very helpful people to have in your team. If you do get to the point where you are required to register for GST, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, and therefore, if you are registered for GST, you must lodge a quarterly BAS statement, the business activity statement. And that can be really, when I kind of reached that point, I was like, whoa, I'm so out of my depth right now. And of course, if you're not meeting those reporting requirements, you can find yourself being, pretty nasty sort of slap on the wrist and some pretty awful fines from the Australian Tax Office. So you really want to make sure that you are doing your due diligence and making sure you are really managing your finances well. Again, have a look on the business.gov.au website. Go to the finance section. There's a lot of information there, but it is very good. It's very comprehensive. It takes you step by step through things. So have a look at the Australian government's business website for business owners, but also the Victorian business website as well. There's just very, very good information that's freely accessible for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about what doulas often call a meet and greet or meet and connect. Essentially, this is that initial meeting, perhaps after a potential client has contacted you and has expressed interest in maybe learning a bit more about you and your services. And most doulas will offer a free, no obligation meet and greet. And now it's really interesting that in this sort of, sort of almost post-COVID era, where everything was online, the meet and greets kind of transitioned from meeting in a cafe to doing a Zoom. And I have to say, I do all my meet and greets over Zoom now, and they're fantastic. And they work really well for me, for the clients. And so I would sort of strongly suggest you do that. I mean, by all means, if it's not inconvenient and you can meet somewhere locally, there's definitely something to be said about the face-to-face kind of interaction. But I do think that Zoom does, more than adequately fulfill the need and the service that you would provide in terms of a free session. And if you've also got some some information either on your website, or you have something like an info booklet or brochure or something like that you can email either before or following up after the meet and greet. That's also really good because then you can essentially summarize all the information that you might have shared with a client. It saves them having to write down a whole bunch of things like your costs and again what you provide, what's in your package, what's not, etc. So that's something else I'd consider having ready to go when you do have your sort of meet and greets with clients. In the very beginning, it's completely understandable that something like this might feel a little bit overwhelming and a bit scary. So one thing I'd really like you to do, and if you've got, a friend or a partner, family member at home, I'd love you to try and do a little bit of a role play meet and greet. Essentially, if you're whoever you can, drag to help you along with this, get them to pretend that they are the potential client. And that you are, hopefully the doula that they'll hire. If we have some time when we meet up for our final face-to-face session in a few weeks, then it would be great, actually, maybe I might get you guys to work in pairs and to sort of swap and do a little quick role play as well. It's just a really great skill to get a little bit of practice around so you feel confident. And another thing that you can do in preparation is to both write down a list of questions that, if you were a client, what you imagine you might ask a potential doula about, what you do and what your services are and so forth. So write a list of questions from the client's perspective, and then also make sure that you've kind of considered what, the answers to those things as well. So there's a few things there to think about. Try and get some practice so that you're feeling, polished and confident when you do meet potential clients. So in the meantime, try and grab somebody at home to do a quick role play with, and then hopefully, as I said, if we have time in our face-to-face session, we'll do a quick swap so you can work with somebody else in the group and each of you practice being a doula and a potential client. Okay. So just to follow on from the previous slide about meet and greet, I won't read through this, but leave you, in your own time to go through this slide. But there's some tips here on sort of preparing for your meeting and imagining what sort of questions you might get asked, and some tips on how to sort of navigate the meeting and how to keep things going in a sort of really relaxed and friendly way. So you can use that prior to doing your meet and greet, and perhaps thinking about what written materials you might like to supplement with that in terms of things you can send potential clients before or after your meeting as well. So the next few slides, we are going to talk about writing a business plan. And one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of this module was that, initially you might want to just sort of go through this whole presentation, just sort of taking maybe, just sort of a few notes here and there, and so forth. But in fact, if you are planning to start a business, then in fact this, the material that's contained in this particular session may take you many months to actually really do a deep dive and be very, very thorough and comprehensive in your business planning. And this is a good example. Writing a good business plan really can take many months of work. And as I've said here in the slide, it might feel like a really mammoth undertaking, but it is actually something really worthwhile doing. You will learn a lot about yourself and your business and your competitors and your target market and your pricing structure and all these things that if you actually take the time to really consider, you are going to start your business in so much stronger a position. Honestly, I can't even begin to emphasize this enough. So many people I know, colleagues and friends of mine, and including people I have trained as childbirth educators, have kind of done the training, got certified, super enthusiastic, want to get going, and they kind of launch off the deep end and start a business. And then within 6 months, 12 months, it's all kind of gone into a giant heap. And they wonder, what did I do wrong? Well, they didn't do anything wrong, but perhaps what they didn't do is really take the time before they put themselves out there in the world to potential customers without really understanding the core of their business. So this is something I would really, really encourage you to sit down and spend time on. There are lots of places to get great information, advice, support for free. One of the first places I would consider maybe you checking out is your local council. Most councils provide a lot of support for local businesses in that council area. They have workshops, they have webinars, they have guest speakers, they have business networking events. Some councils offer a free business mentoring program where they match you with an experienced business person and business owner in your area, not necessarily in your field. It's not going to be a whole lot of maybe doulas and childbirth educators and birth people, but experienced business owners who've kind of, have got the experience and done the hard yards and can really share some wisdom with you. So check out what your council offers. Go to the Business Victoria website, go to the Australian Government Business website. In Business Victoria, they offer a free consultation with a business consultant. So, I say use all the free stuff that's out there. And, again, kind of this post-COVID era, you know, local governments and state governments are really doing a lot to really inject confidence back into the business sector, and are still providing a lot of support to try and get businesses up and running. A lot of people lost their businesses, you know, of course, during COVID, and so we are very much in a recovery phase. And so there is a surprisingly large amount of business mentoring, coaching, and support out there that is free for you to take advantage of. So as I said here at the very end of the slide, lay the groundwork now and reap the benefits in the future. And, you know, I think that is, you know, again, a really hopefully good bit of advice for you. You know, while you may be in this sort of very early stage of like, not quite sure where this business is going to take me, or, you know, what I really want to do. Is this going to be a hobby or a side business, or do I really see myself actually kind of having a complete career change and building, you know, an amazing business that, you know, for my future? Everyone will have different goals, and again, your business plan will help determine what those goals are. So over the next two slides, we're going to kind of break it down into a little bit more detail and give you a sense of kind of what is incorporated into a good business plan. So to get started, I think it's always good to actually define, you know, certain things. So what actually is a business plan? So you can see here in the italics. So your business plan is a formal statement of a set of business goals, the reason why they are believed attainable, and the plan for reaching those goals. It also contains relevant background information about you and your business, which provide additional supporting material and information which help inform your business plan and attainable goals. So in the same way that there are things like, you know, free to download templates for your record keeping, so Excel spreadsheets and things like that. Likewise, there are some fantastic free business plan templates that are available online. And, you know, what you might find is that you may go to a few websites. They don't have to be, you know, from the Australian government or Business Victoria. You may find, you know, in the commercial world, just Google, you know, business plan templates. I'm sure a gazillion search results will come up. And I'm sure you don't need to pay for any of them. There'll be lots of stuff for free. What I would do is download a few, look at them, compare them, and you may find that you like one over another, or that you like certain parts of one, but you kind of prefer that, you know, sections from another website or template. So mix and match, copy, paste, put together something that really works best for you. You know, I remember when I was originally doing mine, I think the template that I had also incorporated, it was equally, I suppose, you know, applicable to both service businesses that were service providers and others that were providing products, you know, selling products. Now, I wasn't selling products. I was purely a service provider. So all the stuff in the business plan template that was about stock and renewables and depreciable this and all this, I was like, oh, I don't know what, and I didn't need any of it. So I just literally deleted whole chunks of it because it was completely irrelevant for my business. So it's really important that you find a template that actually, for the most part, kind of fits your business structure. And that's why you may find it's helpful to look at a few before you settle on, you know, putting your own thing together. So this slide just gives you a quick overview of what sections would typically be included in a business plan. And, you know, you may not find that you need all of these, particularly for a simple business structure, but I'll just quickly go through this. So the business overview is a very quick, kind of like, if you think about a research study, you know, you have the abstract or the plain language summary. That's kind of like, it's a one page, very, very simple, you know, what your business is. A personal background statement. So again, obviously a little bit about you, what you bring to the business, your experience, your skills, your qualifications, etc. The business and financial goals and objectives for the first and second year of the business. So you're looking at the immediate future, but you also want to look at projections and growth for the business as well. Your marketing plan, and we're going to go into fair bit of detail about that later in this session. So what would be included within the marketing plan there. Legals and insurance. So, you know, one of the things I think pretty sure is included in this, but I'll mention it now just in case it doesn't come up a lot later, is it's really imperative to have insurance. The two forms of insurance that I think you should have is what we call third-party public liability insurance, and the other is something called professional indemnity, or PI insurance. If you join Doula Network Australia, they have brokered a very, very good deal with an insurance company who have produced a product specifically for doulas and birth workers. It encompasses childbirth educators as well. It's extremely reasonable. It's, I think from memory, is under $200 a year. And it provides very comprehensive coverage, you know, in the very, very unlikely circumstance where you are sued. And that's where you want the public liability, particularly, and the professional indemnity insurance. So small amount of money, huge relief. And so, you know, if you purchased your policy, simply what you would put in your business plan here is a copy of what we call your certificate of currency, which is basically a certificate proving you are, you know, insured and currently insured. Your financial plan. So likewise, you know, similar to the marketing plan, is the, you know, how much money do you want to make, and how are you proposing that you're going to earn that. The management plan, I would say, small business, you are everything. You are the owner of the business, you're the marketing, you're the finance, you're the HR, you're the communications and the copywriter and the graphic designer and everything else. So you probably don't need a management plan here. And business development is, you know, well, how's the business going to grow over time? You know, partnerships, networking, collaborations, you know, etc., or areas that you feel, you know, in 2 years or in 5 years you see as additional income streams, or, you know, areas where you wish to grow the business further. So that's a quick overview there for you. And we won't go through all of these things in this session, and again, oops, I realized I cut myself off at the very end of that slide. It wasn't anything particularly important, but I was simply saying that we won't cover all those things in the, you know, all those components of a business plan, just to say that, in fact, again, just reiterating the value of looking at something like Business Victoria or the business.gov.au website in their business and finance section, because it's super comprehensive, and pretty much everything you could possibly want to know about writing a business plan you will find on those sort of websites. So on this side here, we've got you know, some sort of admin considerations, just something to think about in terms of, you know, setting up your business and your workspace and that sort of thing. If you are essentially, you know, planning to primarily or initially really work as a doula, you know, you're probably not going to need a dedicated workspace, a consulting space, or a studio or anything like that. If, however, you are planning to expand or to offer more than one service, such as childbirth education, or you're an allied health practitioner, you might do pregnancy massage, for example, then, you know, you will need to sort of start thinking about, well, where am I going to offer these services? So it may not be something to think, you know, to sort of overly be concerned with right now. But again, as you're writing the business plan, maybe in that business development section, like, well, actually in 3 years, I can see myself, or I would really like to build the business into these areas. And therefore, I'm going to have to think about commercial, you know, space to hire, or perhaps partnership with, you know, somebody that runs, you know, an allied health sort of studio or something, and I might hire on a, you know, casual or permanent basis a room, you know, something like that. So they're just things to be thinking about. You know, as I said, may not be super relevant right now, but in the future, you know, who knows. So thinking about, well, what kind of facility might you need? These are other sort of more general questions about your business. How will people know about your services? So this obviously speaks very much to your marketing, which we will move on to. We've talked a little bit about your registration and record keeping processes. So again, really, really helpful to have those things all set up and ready to go before you take your first client on. And is there any equipment that you need in your business? Do you need teaching aids? Do you need charts, posters? Do you need a doll, a pelvis? All those sort of things. So have a think about what information or resources that you might want to be providing your clients, or what materials you might need. Other things as well as a doula is thinking about your doula bag. What's in your doula bag. We've covered that previously in the course, but those are things that you're going to need to purchase. It might be massage aids. It may be battery operated candles. It might be ethically sourced rebozos, etc., etc. So again, once you have a registered business, these are tax deductible expenses. Don't buy them and then launch your business, because you will not be able to claim for them. Register the business first. So again, starting to think about, okay, even with a small business, there are some things to really be thinking about, really before you just sort of, jump off the deep end. So let's spend a few minutes talking about your marketing plan. As I said, this does form, quite a substantial part of your overall business plan. And it might be something that you kind of pull out from the business plan to continue to work on as you sort of grow and promote your business. All businesses benefit from developing a marketing plan, and that includes a doula business. Even though most birth work, be that you're a doula or a birth educator, for example, even a private midwife for that matter, even though it's a very word of mouth business, very much a word of mouth business, it's still important to develop a marketing plan, because it's important from the outset for you to be able to identify strategies and actions that you're going to need to kind of put in place to basically ultimately achieve your personal sales goals. Now, what one person's sales goals are may be completely different to someone else's. So one of the first questions I often ask people when they're starting out a birth business is, what do you want to make, as in, financially, versus what do you need to make? And they are two very different things. So with that in mind, think about that, because again, that's sort of going to drive a lot of what you do and how you do it. The other thing as well that is, why a marketing plan is so valuable is that it helps you to be proactive rather than reactive. What you don't want is a situation where you look at kind of your, I say, quote, competition. I know that sounds very kind of sort of dog eat dog and competitive, but like any business, there are competitors in the marketplace, and that includes other doulas. So, rather than going, that doula gets all the work and I can't seem to get any inquiries, and what am I doing wrong, and all of that sort of thing, that's a very reactive approach to building a business, which is exhausting and not particularly sustainable. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this previously in the course, but the average lifespan of a doula is about 3 years. It is primarily due to burnout and exhaustion and frustration, and I would also throw into that mix probably a decent dose of trauma as well, sadly. But I also think a big part of why doulas don't sort of find themselves with a sustainable business is because they haven't done this work. They haven't done the marketing plan, they haven't done the overall business plan, the financial strategies, and they're kind of winging it, hoping it'll all kind of fall into place at some point. And you wouldn't do that with any other business. So, I think it's really important to remind yourself that, growing a doula practice, growing a childbirth education practice It's no different than launching any business. So think about your marketing and, try to really set yourself up from the get-go in a proactive stance. So look around you. What is out there in terms of what is being offered by other doulas, by other birth workers? What are women looking for? Understanding and being able to identify your target market is really, really important. Excuse me. One of the, questions I often will ask is, so, who's your target market? And sometimes, doulas or other birth workers look at me kind of a bit blankly and they're like, well, pregnant people? And I'm like, well, yes, but that could potentially be up to close to 50% of the population. So clearly you're not going to be marketing to, half the community out there, because there's no way that you'll do anything effective. So you need to sort of drill down and actually work out, well, who is my kind of ideal client? And we'll look at that a little bit more later in this workshop as well, in this session. But, when you are putting together your marketing plan, here you'll see in the dot points on this slide, here are a number of questions that you want to be able to answer in the overall marketing plan. So what is unique about your service? If you just say, well, I'm a birth doula, well, there might be, another 100 birth doulas out there. So what is a little bit different or unique about what you offer? Who are my customers, or who is my target market? As I said, pregnant women, pregnant people is not the answer. What do my customers need or want? And again, you go, well, doula support, right? Why else would they be contacting me? But what is behind their need for wanting support? Is it because they don't have a partner? Is it because they're feeling really overwhelmed with anxiety, with fear? Is it because they've had a previously traumatic birth experience? There's a million reasons why people are wanting to seek out doula support. So it's really important, again, to understand the needs and desires of your client. What problem do my customers have that I can solve? This is the oldest sort of marketing question in the book, identify the problem and identify the solution, and there you go, you have like a perfect match. What need will my service or product provide? And why will my clients hire me and not my competitors? And that sort of brings me to, it says here next week, ignore that at the bottom of the slide. This will just be a continuation of your work in this session, but you're going to do a few things that you're actually going to find here in the in your workbook. It's all very blurry, sorry about that, you can see, but you'll see it in the assignments list, but in your workbook you will see sort of a table for a competitor analysis. So that's one thing I'd like you to fill in. You'll also see another table which says defining your target market. Who exactly is my quote ideal client? That's another little exercise. And the third one here is a SWOT analysis. And I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with SWOT. We're going to go through that shortly as well. So these are three quite sort of practical exercises that you can do at home in your own time. And together, those three kind of more in-depth sort of analysis of, the sort of the environment as well as your potential customers, clients, will really then help to inform your marketing and the overall business plan as well. But we'll get into that as we go through these slides. So let's unpack just a little bit more about what the financial plan should include and what information in the financial component of your business plan should include. So obviously it's a plan for the business from a financial perspective. That will give you personally some really good insights into, I guess, the viability of your business and financial viability. It will also give you the pure exercise of putting together a financial plan will really give you some important skills in terms of what is required to manage a small business. And there's some important legal sort of components as well. So things like making sure you keep all of your financial records for a minimum of 5 years. That is the law. So again, hence, I made that point a little bit earlier about the importance of, starting as you mean to go on, and setting in place really good practices for keeping good records of your financials, and putting those systems in place even at the very beginning when you have the most simple of business structures. So you want to keep all those records. Might be good just to have a chat with somebody like at Business Victoria and get their advice about the best way to maintain your records and what the requirements of the ATO are. And the other thing as well that you will gain in terms of insights by doing a financial plan is working out what to charge your clients. So this is one thing that, again and again, I hear people asking, I see it in doula forums, what do I charge? Or I'm a new doula and I don't have the same experience as somebody else, and I feel really bad about charging X amount of dollars. Or you are more experienced, you're like, oh, should I charge the same as like my competition, or less than, or a little bit more than, or a lot more than? So all those sort of questions get quite hard to answer without doing the research behind them. It's really not something you should just arbitrarily sort of decide upon and go, oh, I think I'll charge $1,500 for my doula support, or $900 or $3,000. There has to be a reason behind it. And so again, this is where you do that work, and you can also, through the financial plan, put in place, a whole bunch of variables and assumptions, and based on those assumptions, look at, well, if I did this, this, and this, or I did X number of births, or whatever it is, and this is what I'll come out with. Or if I change it and I only take this many, this will be the outcome. So you can kind of play with the figures a little bit like that. And that really, again, helps you to work out, well, is this a financially viable business? It goes back to that question, what do you want to make versus what do you need to make? So if this is an area where you're feeling a little bit sort of stressed about, diving into, don't worry. I can tell you honestly from my own personal experience, this is probably the area where I kind of was sweating bullets, because I was just at school, I think about going back to school, I was so bad at maths, I was so bad at anything to do with numbers, so I kind of would go into a cold sweat about this. But there are really good resources, and you do not need to have years of big business experience or great accounting skills or anything to sort of do a really solid and comprehensive financial plan. And as I said, there's lots of great support networks out there, from everything from your local council all the way through to the Australian government business website. So one of the many, I think, advantages of starting a business as a doula is you don't have a lot of overheads. You don't need to hire or rent, commercial, commercial premises run an office out of. You don't need to hire staff. You don't have a whole lot of overheads. You don't need to buy stock. So it's a very, very simple business structure. We'll talk also about registering businesses in terms of what kind of what kind of business that you register. But look, I've put a lot of things on this list. By no means should you feel you need to spend money on these things. It may be that there's only a couple of things on here to start with that you feel would be really necessary. But again, business plans, remember, are about not just the now, but projecting into the future. Where are you now, but where do you want to be? So while you might not be thinking some of these things are at all necessary now, maybe in 5 years they will be. So you've got your ongoing business overhead. So some of these you can't avoid paying. So, insurance premiums, probably going to have some bank fees. You may join Doula Network of Australia and find that that's an important professional membership to maintain. You've got your phone, you've got internet costs. So there's some things, of course, you can't not pay. They're just these ongoing costs. Then you're going to have sort of promotional materials. And again, you may decide that, in this era of everything online, you're not going to print anything in hard copy, maybe a business card only or a flyer or something. But look, some doulas go all out, really brand their business. I've seen doulas, with bags, with t-shirts, with hoodies. They put, decals on their cars, and you can go to town if you've got the budget for it. But starting out, you probably don't. So I'd say those are the sort of things that you really, they're kind of like the wish list when you've got good cash flow going through the business. And then you've got your doula bag, which we've mentioned a little bit earlier in the session. So again, deciding what you really need to buy in terms of what you take to births and maybe what you lend to clients. I know some doulas who rent out TENS machines. I know other doulas who rent out their Cub, which is if you remember, is that sort of teal blue inflatable. It's the comfortable upright birth. So there's a variety of things, but again, you're probably going to have at a bare minimum some equipment which you will take to all your births. And as I said, these are tax deductible items for your business. Some of them are things you don't have to replace very often, and other things you may need to be replenishing very frequently. So that's, again, probably not a completely exhaustive list, but it's just things to be thinking about, that in fact, even with a very small business, there are still quite a lot of things to be considering, a lot of moving parts that you need to be aware of and accounting for from a financial perspective. I'm not sure if anybody in the group has ever registered a business before. If you haven't, it's a very simple process and a very inexpensive process at that. But if you are going to start a business, you do legally need to register a business registration and get an ABN, an Australian business number. And that's all done through, you can see business.gov.au. You should also check that your business name is not being used by someone else, and you can search for that on the Australian Business Registry, and make sure you have got a a unique business name. Saying that, what most sole traders do, and I would suggest that probably all of you would probably be registering as a sole trader. So basically, you are your business. As a result, you don't need what's called an ACN, an Australian company number. Only limited companies require that. So you just have an ABN. And as a sole trader, your business name is your name. So, for me, for example, I'm Tanya Cawthorne, but I'm trading as T/A, my business name, which is Birthwell Birthright. If you want to go one step further and purchase that business name, so no one else can use Birthwell Birthright, for example, then there is an additional cost to that. In terms of GST, I would strongly suggest and advise you not to register for GST unless you legally have to. And in order to be required to apply for GST, your business needs to turn over in excess of 75,000 gross per annum. You can register, anybody can register for GST if you're earning below that amount, but it is a lot of extra work. As I said, you've got your quarterly BAS to do. You probably would need the services of a bookkeeper who's licensed to, submit BAS statements on your behalf, etc. So I sort of feel, keep it simple for as long as you can, and don't overcomplicate the business if you possibly can avoid it. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the session about insurance, and specifically third-party public liability and professional indemnity, or PI insurance. And so, we have talked about that already a little bit, and I just wanted to emphasize again how important I feel it is that doulas do have professional insurance. Even though we are not health practitioners, and therefore we don't come under the auspice of AHPRA, which is the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, it does not mean that we can't be sued. So I just think, just to protect yourself, as I said, it's a small amount of money to pay for an enormous amount of peace of mind, and I think just in and of itself that is worth it. And if you do join Doula Network Australia, which again I would really recommend, it's a very, very low membership cost. If you are a DNA member, then you can gain access to this very, very low cost policy that they have brokered a deal with. I think it's a insurance company called BMI from memory, BMS. Anyway, once you get into DNA and you're on their Facebook page, for example, you just type in insurance in the search in their Facebook group, it'll come up there once you've joined and you've got a DNA membership number. It's as easy as like pie. It's literally about a 5-minute application, and wham bam, it's all done online. And it's a combined policy, so you don't have to apply separately for the third party and separately for the PI insurance. It's a combined policy, so it's super, super easy, and yeah, a great way to start your business off and to professionalize yourself as well. I mentioned just a few minutes ago about the fact that doula work and really most birth work is very, very word of mouth business, and that you gain so many of your clients from somebody who's recommended you, and eventually once you've had a number of clients that you've supported, they will recommend their friends, or they will come back to you for a second baby and so forth. But the other thing, and I guess the other avenue that you can explore in terms of developing those networks and that word of mouth sort of community is looking around you, really in your local community. So looking at where you're working, where you live, the hospital, that sort of network of areas where most of your clients are likely to birth, for example. I live in the inner southeast of Melbourne. I do service and most of the metro hospitals, but for example, I really probably won't go to the northern. Occasionally I'll do Sunshine, but so therefore I know that more of my client base and target market is more in that inner metro area, or in this sort of south, or in the eastern suburbs. So things like that, thinking about where am I located, where are my clients located. But thinking about sort of community-based and professional partnerships that you can really engage with, where you can build relationships, is a really, really valuable thing. So one of the little assignments for this week is I'd like you to write a list, I can see here, of local community-based organizations you think you might be able to partner with. Or that you think that there might be cross-referral opportunities in the future. So you might, for example, know that there is a prenatal yoga class in your neighborhood, and therefore clearly lots of pregnant people going to do yoga classes, or pregnancy massage, or an acupuncturist who works in fertility. So it's important to identify who these people are and these other allied health practitioners and businesses are in your area. Don't just drop off some flyers and expect that you'll start getting a ton of referrals. You've got to meet those people. You've got to build an authentic relationship with them. Let them learn about you, who you are, the services that you provide. show genuine interest in the services that they provide, because ultimately these might be people that you hopefully will refer your clients to. I get asked all the time from clients, do I know anyone who does really great pregnancy massage? Do I know a pelvic floor specialist? Do I know good lactation consultants, etc.? Again, part of the reason why I'm getting you all to write these really extensive resource lists is because it's as beneficial to you as it is to your clients as well. So spend a little bit of time, thinking about that and maybe building out a little bit of a list. And in the, going forward, make this your kind of your to-do list of places just to literally get out there in the community, go and introduce yourself, see if people can maybe meet you for a coffee, and start to build some of those really valuable relationships. Also important to consider other professional organizations in this space that are really, probably really worthwhile joining. They're great for professional development purposes. They're great for networking. They're great for maybe perhaps, building a network of other doulas that, in the future you're going to need to know doulas that can help you with backup, for example. So obviously we've mentioned Doula Network Australia a number of times. CAPIA is another organisation that you might want to check out, the Childbirth and Parenting Educators of Australia. It's a national organisation. It's the only organisation that encompasses birthing and parenting educators all over Australia, but many doulas are also members of CAPIA. They also have a conference, they run workshops, they have state-based chapters as well. So here in Melbourne there is CAPIA Victoria, and they've got their own kind of local president and so forth. So that's also another avenue of birthing professionals to connect with. The next two, Maternity Choices Australia, Maternity Consumer Network, or MCN, are both advocacy-based organizations, and it might be an area that you're really passionate about, is the advocacy and consumer representation. And so they are also good organizations, if you're not to join, but certainly to be following on social media, because they do share lots of really interesting and sometimes very important information. And then finally, I think I mentioned in the infant feeding session a couple of weeks ago about the Australian Breastfeeding Association, ABA, have a separate website for health professionals, where if you are interested in furthering your breastfeeding education, professional development, upskilling in that area, not necessarily to become a board certified lactation consultant, but certainly to build on your breastfeeding knowledge, then check out the ABA's separate website. You won't find it, or you might find it through the ABA. There might be a separate link through for professionals, but otherwise this is their direct link to their website for health professionals. So that's something else you might want to look at in terms of maybe upskilling or offering additional services down the track as well. So quite separate to birth related and allied health specific networks and organizations and businesses and so forth, don't discount more broad business skills training and just, again, general professional networking opportunities. There are both community-based and, government organizations that provide those sort of opportunities. There's also, a very, very healthy, very robust kind of women in business community as well. There's lots of Facebook groups, there's lots of meetups. There are, a number of organizations. One I'm thinking of in particular is called One Roof. If you just look them up, you can join as a virtual member and participate in everything from workshops to networking opportunities and masterclasses and all sorts of things. A lot of, again, councils will run women in business groups, mentoring, networking events, etc. So have a little bit of a Google and do some online research maybe about just general business support groups, as well as maybe specifically women in business groups. not only are they great places to learn business skills, marketing skills, financial skills, just in general networking skills. That's what they're all about, meeting, greeting, becoming really comfortable about introducing yourself. Great place to sort of practice what we call sometimes your elevator pitch, right? Which is your sort of 30-second, who am I, what do I do, what's my business, explaining what doulas are, etc., etc. But you might find future clients, it might be a great place to actually generate future business. And I think sometimes as well, I mean, as much as, we're probably all, a bunch of real birth nerds, and we love doing birth related, professional development and online courses and so forth. Again, I think some of the most valuable sort of information and skills that I have gained over the years have come from attending just straight up business or marketing workshops, nothing to do with birth, pregnancy, parenting, nothing, just straight out business and commerce or marketing or social media or branding or whatever it might be. Because you can just sit there and think, how can I adapt this to my business? And I guarantee you, everything is adaptable. So think a little bit outside the box when it comes to gaining your business and marketing skills. And as I said, just do a little bit of a search and find those groups that you really have a good connection with, and they're social. Running your own business and being a sole trader can be quite a lonely kind of pursuit. So it's actually really nice and really healthy to to build friends and friendship circles and professional networking as well. It's a great way as well, just to sort of boost your social life as well. Another thing to think about is possibly being able to take advantage of small business grants. I think I mentioned earlier that sort of in this sort of, I guess, post-COVID era that we live in, the state government is, really pulling out all the stops, trying to help businesses to regenerate, to reinvent themselves, to, kind of almost, phoenix from the ashes kind of thing. So there is money out there and support. For example, I'm thinking about my local council, which is Glenira Council. They have a really wonderful partnership with Homes Glen TAFE and I think RMIT as well. And every year, when they have students who have to do as part of their graduate presentation and project, they either have to build a website or they have to do some kind of IT related project, but quite in depth. And these are third year graduates, so they're already very skilled, and you can get a third year student for free to build your website, for example. So look for those sort of things as well, because you could, find some amazing support. I remember one year I had a student, I think she was from Homes Glen, and she was wanting to work in sort of medical / the health industry from a business or an admin support role, maybe eventually to sort of manage a medical practice, for example. So she was able to get work experience with me, and she provided enormous help and support for me from an admin perspective. And I think I had her one day a week for about 3 months. And it didn't cost me anything because it was a government subsidized internship for her. So there are lots of really, really good opportunities out there. The other thing as well, maybe to think about is, you might want to be able to offer your services for free or very heavily subsidized, maybe for in future, in a similar way to Birth for Humankind, obviously offering free doula support. But say, for example, you end up teaching childbirth education and you want to be able to give back to the community and provide a subsidized or a space free of charge for women from underserved communities. you might be able to get a small business grant from your local council that would fund you. So essentially you're not giving your time for free, but would provide a free space, maybe, spot every month for a person from that community. So again, just think a little bit laterally about where you can get some support for your business or support for the community with the work that you hope to do. So the NEIS program, NEIS, which stands for New Enterprise Incentive Scheme, is, I think, one of the hidden gems that we have here. Certainly in Victoria. I'm not sure if it's a program that exists outside of Victoria. This is a scheme that has been around for now many, many years. It essentially is a fully subsidized business program to help new business owners launch their business. It is a training that encompasses both a sort of more, I suppose, classroom-based or online-based training program. And then there is the mentorship end of it. So it's a full 12-month program. The first 3 months from memory are the course itself, and then there's 9 months where you are matched to a mentor and you receive a subsidy for the whole year. You do need to qualify for NEIS, and again, if you just type in the NEIS program online, you'll see all of the criteria, the eligibility criteria. I believe you do need to be in receipt of a Centrelink payment. It does not have to be unemployment benefit. It can be something else. So there are criteria. You can't be full-time employed, for example. So I moved back from overseas in 2012, and somebody had put me onto the NEIS program, and so this was actually how I managed to launch my business. I had never, as I said, worked for myself before. I had been out of Australia for about 10 years, so I really had very little idea about how businesses operated in Australia, or certainly in Melbourne. And this, honestly, I think was the best thing I ever did. It was the best decision I ever made in terms of, launching or sort of relaunching my new career. At that point, I was just teaching childbirth education. So obviously things have grown and developed significantly for me over the last 10 years. But this was just the best grounding and foundation that I could really possibly have wanted, so that when I was sort of on my own, I felt really confident and kind of felt like I knew sort of what I was doing. The other great thing is at the completion of the training, you can get either a Certificate 3 in micro business operations or a Cert 4 in new small business. I think I ended up with a Cert 4 in what they used to call small business management, I think. You also, so the main crux of the program is at the end of that sort of 13 weeks of training, you need to submit your full business plan. So you kind of get handheld along the way. You have a marketing lecturer, you have a finance lecturer, you have all these different specialists who help you to build and on certain elements of the business plan, and that is your final submission. So look into NEIS. I think it is an amazing program that we are so lucky to have. And if you do qualify, I would strongly suggest that you consider it as a great sort of launching pad for your business. So this is probably the invisible sort of separation from what had originally been sort of part 1 and part 2 of the sort of business of being a doula. So if you're feeling like you've kind of got enough information for the moment, and you kind of want to give yourself a little bit of a breather, this is probably a good place just to kind of go, okay, that was enough information. I'm going to give myself a bit of space to absorb all that. So this sort of section is really dealing more with the marketing side of things, social media, branding, you know, etc. So it's sort of more that sort of traditional marketing communications. So I'm going to start with just talking a little bit about your website or your future website. Again, not a huge amount of detail, but just hopefully enough to kind of give you some kind of food for thought about where you might want to go with it. So what I would say is having a website's essential, especially if you do plan to go ahead and have, you know, your own business as an independent doula. You know, and a good website that's well designed, that's got what we call good SEO or search engine optimization. Basically what that means is, and you know, we all do it, right? We all go onto Google and we're searching for something. Now, we know that there's a few ads at the very, very top there. If you're anything like me, I almost deliberately avoid the ads because I know somebody's getting paid for that. I'll scroll down just a little bit and I'll go to the first, what we call organic search, you know, on that list. Anything that's on the first page or so of Google, you know that website has got good SEO. They've got lots of words, phrases in their website, which mean that you get a good hit and a good sort of hit rate. So that's what you're looking for, is to sort of, you know, be quite visible eventually on search engines, and, you know, particularly on Google, which is where pretty much 99.99% of us go when we're looking for things online. So we're going to break this down a little bit, as I said, and look at what you need in terms of a good website. Okay, so first thing is first, you need to work out what your business name is. And once you've determined that and you've registered the business, you've checked that no one else has got it, for example, then you want to go ahead and actually purchase your website domain. You know, choosing your business name is probably one of the hardest things you're going to need to decide. It can take kind of ages to settle on what feels like, you know, the right name. There's nothing wrong, by the way, of, you know, using your own name as your business name, you know. So don't feel like you have to come up with something if you know, just want to use your own name. You are your own brand, if you like. So that's really important. You know, I think something that has got you know, real strength in terms of its name, it has to have meaning for you as well. It needs to have some kind of, you know, meaning and connection. You know, I've written here on the slide some considerations, some things to think about. Just, you know, this is maybe my own personal kind of pet peeve here. But we don't need any more birth businesses that have the word blooming or lotus or belly or anything that's pregnancy, birth and beyond or any variation of that, because you're not going to stand out. That's the problem. You know, and again, if you had a business that, as I said, was, you know, blooming belly birth services, from an SEO point of view, then, you know, you're really going to struggle to differentiate your business from a lot of others. So let's just, for the sake of just assuming you've now come up with your perfect business name, then as I said, check that no one else is using that business. So look up the ABN lookup for that. And then you can go and purchase your domain. There's many websites where you can do that. Something like GoDaddy is probably one of the biggest. And you know, look, a domain shouldn't really cost you more than about $20 a year, really, unless it's a very, very sought after you know, domain. So, and I would generally do a sort of a .com.au or, you know, .com. I wouldn't bother with a, you know, a .biz or a whatever. There's a few sort of other ones, but again, think about what you tend to do when you're looking up websites and what is the most common. Sometimes when you purchase a domain, you can also get one free email address with that as well. So check that out. But there are also, when you actually sort of using a web building service, sometimes a subscription with them also includes a free email. So don't double up. Maybe look at everything before you commit to purchasing anything, so that you know that you're not doubling up and paying twice for something. So we'll get a little teeny bit technical here, but hopefully not too technical. So when you have got your domain, you know, and which is, you know, obviously www.whatever.com.au.com, you will need to build a website, or, you know, have someone design it for you. Hopefully though, and I do feel very strongly that this is something that most people can do pretty easily on their own without going to what is, you know, usually a very costly exercise of hiring a web designer into the thousands for sure. So the best thing to do is to look at the template-based websites that assist you to basically build your own website. Now, the advantage of these is that they also, for, you know, part of your annual fee is that includes the hosting, right? A website can't exist in nowhere. It has to be hosted onto the internet. So, you know, if you hire a web designer who builds a website for you, they'll probably use the professional sort of version of WordPress, which is wordpress.org. And then on top of that, you need to have your website hosted, which often the designer can organize for you as well. But there's much easier and much more cost-effective ways of doing this. So my strongest advice to you is look at some of these websites here. I would actually say Squarespace would be my favorite at the moment. I think they have the nicest templates. It's very user-friendly. You do not need to have any web design or web building experience. It's intuitive and beautifully laid out. So for a small fee, you know, purchase a subscription, an annual subscription. They, through the back end of that, already automates the essentially will forgotten the term for it, map your domain. So instead of the website being www.squarespace.bloomingbellies.com.au, the Squarespace will disappear and it'll just be www.bloomingbellies.com.au, right? So no one will know that it's a Squarespace website, right? And I think for that small cost a year, which is probably, you know, maybe $100 give or take a year, you can remove the Squarespace branding from the website. It means you can also have a business email address. So it would be, you know, in my case with my business, Tanya@birthwellbirthright.com. If you can, again, it's a small cost, but in terms of really professionalizing yourself, you know, you don't want to have a Gmail or a Hotmail account as your business account. It really sends just it's a subtle, but it's almost something that people don't register until it's like, oh, they're using Gmail for their work, you know, rather than the domain of their business. So again, these are small and very low cost, you know, business overheads, but I think that they go a long way to really kind of upscaling you on a professional level. Other websites you can definitely check out is wordpress.com, Weebly, Wix. As I said, my go-to would be Squarespace, because I think they're probably really the biggest player in the market right now, with the most templates and really good functionality, really good opportunity to brand you know, your website with your own color palette, you know, all those sort of things. So, but check them all out. You might find you prefer one over the other. So this slide and the next slide, so the next couple of slides, I have just listed really what I personally think are kind of the must-haves on your website. So at a bare minimum, these are the pages and the information that really needs to be there. So I've mentioned that first dot point there. I've mentioned about the branding. So spend that little bit of extra money and get the branding of the website out of your URL, and likewise with your email. Your homepage, obviously your homepage is like your calling card, right? It's replaced what really was the business card of yesteryear. Everything that your client needs to know about who you are, what you offer, where you're located, and how to contact you needs to be clearly visible on the homepage. Yes, it can be on every other page, but if it's not there on the homepage, you've lost them. I remember recently actually just randomly looking up something, and I was looking at a childbirth educator's website, and I went through the entire site, literally every page of it. I had no idea where this person lived, what state they were in. I did work out they were Australian, but other than a phone number, and they had like a, contact me type of thing. It was a form you had to sort of submit. I had no clue where this person lived. I'm thinking, if I'm looking for a childbirth education class, I kind of want to know where this person was located. So like, it's just like it's a massive fail. But you'd be surprised how many people do that. So make sure those things are right front and center, first thing you see when you download that homepage. You also need a kind of an about me page, right? And remember that this is a very heart-centered profession. It's a very personal business. And when people hire a doula, they're hiring somebody that they ultimately need to feel very, very comfortable with. And it isn't very emotionally driven. People want to feel that there's a connection, that they resonate with you, that you share similar values, etc. So it's okay for your about me and your little biog to not be like a business biog, right? But to be more of a personal story, a little window into who you are. I think it's also really important to have a great photo of yourself. Again, you don't need to spend money on a professional, headshot or anything, just a really good photo of yourself. It might be you with your children, whatever that, again, is a reflection of who you are. You also need a page on the website which clearly outlines what it is you offer, and I said, and where, again, your location. Your target audience, and obviously how you word that, you word it in such a way that the person reading it will go, oh, I want her services, because you have written it in a way that you are connecting with that person. They see themselves in you and they recognize that you have shared values, right? This is the next one here, your cost. Now there's a little bit of controversy about this, whether you display your costs or you don't. Now, all the research actually that has been done, particularly on millennials and now increasingly the Gen Z or Gen Z generation, shows that these younger people really value transparency. It's a very, very important value that they hold. They kind of want to know what they're up for right up front. If you make them jump through hoops and call them or fill in a form online where they're thinking, oh my God, are you going to use my email address and spam me forever? You're probably not going to get them. So if you sort of do a little bit of market research about this generation, and I've actually provided in the reading material for this week some really fascinating articles both about millennials and Gen Z, and this is our generation of parents. This is exactly who you will be supporting and serving. So you need to understand what they're thinking, what their thought process is, what their buyer decision-making process is, what their value set is, what their relationship with money, with social media, etc., etc. Because when you understand that, you know how to communicate to them, right? It's that what's their problem and how you're going to solve it kind of issue. So my take on cost is be upfront. You know, you value your work, value your services and your time, and you know, put your costs clearly on your website. If all this information is in the too hard basket and people have to trawl through your site or download documents or whatever it is to just find this basic information, I guarantee you they'll move on to the next website. So make life easy for your customers, your potential clients, and make sure that the information that they're seeking is available to them very simply and very quickly. Think about it. Think of yourself, you know, almost do the exercise yourself. You're looking for a doula, and just go on a bunch of doula websites and go, am I finding all this information if I was a potential customer? Okay, so that's the first things, but the next slide will include some other things I think really need to be on your website. So here's some more things which I think you know, really probably should be there if at all possible. The first thing is some kind of a blog. Now the reason why that's helpful is because if you have a website which basically is, you know, states your doula services, what your package is, how much it costs, where you're located, your phone number, etc., etc., there's not a whole lot to update on that unless you suddenly change your mobile number or, you know, or update your cost or whatever it might be. But generally speaking, that will become quite a static website. Now, the problem is that Google likes to reward websites that have fresh content all the time. They will reward you by giving you more visibility, right? You will literally climb higher in the search results. So you'll go from being on page 43, you know, and up and up and up. So the best way to do that is to have regular content on your website that you connect to, you link to from social media. You write a blog, you post a link on your Facebook page or on your Instagram, or you do a TikTok, or, you know, whatever it might be. But you find ways of, you know, crossing from the website to your other media. And Google, through its very intricate network of bots, not human beings, but literally bots that trawl, will go, oh, this website's really good. It's like every week there's something new, or every couple of weeks there's something. So don't feel you have to limit yourself to a written blog. If writing's not your thing, don't stress. Like you can do vlogging, you can do a little video thing, you could do like, you can post link to another article and just kind of put your summary on that, you know, a paragraph or two. You know, so there's a lot of ways of creating sort of fresh content on the website. Contact me. Again, I know it sounds like, you know, I'm stating the obvious, but you would just be so surprised at how many websites either don't include this information at all, or they make it really, really hard. Like, you know, I always think, you know, when people just have a contact me form, but you don't have their email, you don't have a phone number, I'm like, you know, it's like, but I just want to get in touch with you. I don't really want to fill in a form, you know. A links page can be really, really helpful to have. I wouldn't say it's like essential, but it's a nice thing to have. And for example, you can list, you know, you can kind of the resource list actually that you have been working on throughout this course. You can kind of put a version of that up. It's a great thing to, you know, give to your clients and say, hey, there's a really comprehensive pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, you know, resource list on my website. Just send them the link. If you're building relationships with other allied practitioners, that, you know, part of your relationship building is, hey, I'd love to put your website or your contact details on my website, and vice versa, right? Terms and conditions, your refund policy. Again, this, you know, as if you're just offering your doula services, then perhaps you don't need this other than your doula contract, right? Which, you know, you may choose to upload a copy of it to your website, or you may just email it to potential clients. If you are, though, offering education, classes, workshops, services of any kind, product of any kind, that I think it's really important that you do have your T's and C's, or, you know, a refund policy or whatever is relevant. Very simple, plain language. And if you take online bookings, if you take payments online, you know, all those sort of things, it protects you. If you want to look at, you know, what the legalities are around that, what you can say, what you can't say, have a look at places like Consumer Affairs Victoria or the ACCC. And if necessary, you know, certainly you can get a lawyer to look over or help you draft those policies. But again, they're not super complicated. You know, it's not like, you know, it's not like when you you know, I was just thinking, whenever you download the latest version of the iOS on your iPhone, and you have to accept the whatever, and it's like a 50-page thing that, you know, nobody reads, right? We're not talking about that sort of degree of detail. And then just quickly, a couple of other things which you might want to think about. One is testimonials, and this is really interesting because not only do people in general love testimonials, but research shows that millennials, and I would suspect as well the Gen Z population, also really like and value testimonials, particularly when people, it's very clear that it's a real person that's written it, and it's not sort of all in like salesy speak. It needs to be very authentic and genuine. So as long as you make sure you have permission to publish them, and, you know, if you know their name or initials or whatever, just make sure everything is been okayed. But yes, testimonials from past clients are really great. Getting them as well to write reviews on Facebook or a Google review, again, all really, really helpful to build your business. And then finally, multimedia content. I'll talk a little bit more later about, particularly again, this generation of parents, your millennials, your Gen Zs. They live in multimedia world, right? Content is everything. Video content particularly, but also, you know, podcasts and things like that. So think about other ways already that you can provide content, value add. Could be webinars, could be online classes, workshops, videos, as I said, TikTok, Instagram, Reels. There's a lot of different things that you can do that we know are hitting your target audience, but also just a great way to get your name out there a little bit more effectively as well. So we'll talk for a little bit about the content on your website, and specifically how to write good content for your site. There is a real art, if you like, to writing good website copy. It's different to the way people write for magazines or for newspapers or novels. It is a very specific form of writing. But you know, there's a few things that you really need to kind of give it a, you know, once and second over. So it needs to be well written. It needs to be grammatically correct, free of spelling errors. And look, not everybody is kind of like, that's not their thing. So if you know that, like, you know, you're a terrible speller, or English is not your first language, and, you know, and therefore it would be really helpful to have, you know, a native English speaker, or somebody who, you know, a friend who's just, you know, really, really good with grammar and spelling and stuff. And so you can kind of give them, you know, the content to look over and perhaps do a little bit of editing and proofreading for you. You always need to think about the end user, right? Who is reading that content? And of course, we hope that's going to be a future client of yours. So again, you've always got to think about who that target market is. And of course, it makes sense then. You can't start writing the content for your website if you actually haven't worked out who that target audience is, right? So that's why I suggest, along with the business plan, the marketing, etc., that part of that is really drilling down to who this person is in your head. You should be able to see her, almost like touch her, smell her, like she's a real person for you. And then when you've got that person in your head, writing for that person becomes so much easier, right? Because you're not sitting there going, I have no idea what to write. I don't even know, like, because when you've got somebody almost that you feel like you know her, you can create content that you know is going to appeal to that person. I mentioned SEO a little while ago, so search engine optimization. Unfortunately, again, this is why website copy and content is different to, say, writing fiction, right? Writing a novel, writing a magazine article, where with things that are written for the web, the bots in Cyberland need to be able to kind of pick up on these searchable words, these words that high volumes of people are searching for. So just say, for example, somebody is searching, somebody pregnant in Melbourne is looking for a doula. So they're going to type in doula, obviously, or maybe birth support, but probably doula. And they might type in, well, I live in Ringwood, so it'd be great if I had a doula who lived near me. So doula, Ringwood, whatever it might be. So you want to make sure, if you're a doula who lives in Ringwood, that you have that written on your website, multiple pages, and so it'll come up, it'll get extracted by those bots. But there are ways of actually finding out what these keywords are, what these really words and phrases that have a lot of traffic, a lot of search results and stuff. So you can do that. So, and you don't have to actually pay for that. It's actually quite easy to do that. So you do want to make sure that your content is peppered with all of these very searchable words and phrases that that ideal client's looking for. But at the same time, you've got to balance it. You don't want the content to sound very robotic. You don't want it to sound like it's really marketing and salesy. At the same time, it does need to read well and flow well and sound very natural and authentic. So there's a few things to think about there, and that's why writing content for the site sometimes can be a little bit challenging. So imagery and photography is something that's going to play a really, really important part of your website. It's very important for a website, for a business that is a birth-related business, to have really good photos, okay? It is a very visual profession. It's something that, again, when you are pregnant yourself, women are wanting to look at images of pregnant women, of babies, of beautiful, beautiful big bumps, but they also want to see themselves. So again, thinking back to your target audience, I think sometimes we can be kind of guilty on a sort of unconscious bias level of not having a really good wide representation of birthing people on our websites. So, as just a little bit of an exercise, maybe have a look at, at a number of websites and just see, have you got people of color? Do you have plus size mothers? Do you have same-sex couples? I mean, you don't have to have all of those things, but if you're hoping to attract, those families or those diverse populations to you, then your future, hopefully, customer client needs to see themselves in you and be able to relate and feel that you represent them. So getting photos can actually be a little bit more challenging than you might think. And what I've put here in the slide says what not to do. Do not go onto Google and just, download pictures and then pop them on your website. And I've said here, I cannot stress enough how much of a bad idea it is to do this. And it really is. You can absolutely get stung big time for using images without the rights, without a copyright permission to do so. So you've got to make sure that whatever images you use, you have permission to use them, written permission from the photographer, from the people in it as well sometimes, if necessary, or that you have paid a license fee and you keep hold of all of that proof. Again, you probably wanting to keep your costs nice and low. So, I would say perhaps don't go to some of these websites like Getty Images or stock, various stock photo images, which are expensive, often to, purchase the rights to use those images. But I would say as well is that I think people can tell a stock image from a mile away. Again, particularly, our millennial parents, our Gen Z parents, they are all about authenticity. And so you're far better off maybe partnering up with a birth photographer, maybe somebody else who's just launching their business, and seeing if you could do some kind of reciprocal bartering type agreement where you get to use some photos and whatever it might be. Obviously, you then promote their business, you link to their business, etc. So you might have think again a little bit outside the box and how you can get some good images. You might have photos of yourself. I mean, maybe if you had professional photography done when you were pregnant or new mum, and you feel comfortable with using your own photos, you can do that. As long as you've maybe perhaps asked the photographer, if you've got professional photos done, for their permission to use the image as well. So definitely think carefully about images and photography. So here on this slide, I have pretty much just actually in the previous slide explained what's on this one, which is basically what you should do as far as how can you get a hold of good photos for your website. So have a read of this in your own time. So we'll do a little bit of a bit more sort of a deep dive, if you like, into branding and logos and that sort of thing, because eventually you will have a logo for your business probably, and so I just thought it might be helpful just to actually pull apart a little bit these terms, because we often do use brand and logo almost interchangeably, but they're actually quite different things. The first thing I would just ask you to do is just look at the image there on the right hand side. And I guarantee you that you can just look at that image of all the different logos and immediately you know the businesses, right? Excuse me. Apple, I would say, is probably, one of the most iconic images. It doesn't need the word Apple anymore, right? It's just that image that you know. The M, right? The golden arches, that is a universally known logo. Everybody the world over knows it's Macca's, etc. So these are obviously some of the most powerful and known brands in the world. The Nike tick, right? It's another one, which again is just hugely and instantly recognizable. So when we talk about a logo, right, a logo is a design element, right? It's easily recognizable. It's often includes a name, but I said not always, hence like the Apple logo, for example. But a good logo kind of evokes some kind of emotion or memory or some feeling, basically, from the viewer, the user. And a lot of time and money and research goes into logo design as well, certainly for the big companies. Now, brand is different, right? It's connected, but it's actually a different thing altogether. So the brand is really every interaction that a consumer will have with that business. And essentially, the branding must evoke the experience that consumer has with the brand, right? So essentially everything they do, whether if it's a shop, when you walk in, how the staff treat you, the look of the shop, the packaging, the colors, literally everything, plus your online experience with that business, needs to be consistently and reliably the same, and hopefully a very high standard every single time you go. So it's an experience. It's an emotionally based experience that people have with your business. So it's more than just the visual representation. If anything, the logo is just the end result of the brand experience, if you like. And I put here down at the end of the slide, a logo all by itself is just a graphic element with a name. A brand is the communication strategy that helps you communicate your passion and expertise. When combined, a well-planned logo and a brand strategy help you to effectively and efficiently reach your audience, communicate your message, your value and benefits, and visually attract more attention. So I hope that helps just to sort of differentiate those two terms a little bit. So this, similarly to one of the earlier slides where I had sort of suggested business expenses, and things that you may produce, this would fall under that as well, and would be, although it would come under the marketing plan, would also feature in your financial plan as well, especially if you did decide to actually produce some of these materials. So again, this is not, don't treat this as I must have all of these things. You might actually choose to have none of the, well, I say none of these things, almost none of these things. I said I would think a website's essential, website and say a business card. But, you might want to have a flyer or gift certificates or magnets or stickers or t-shirts and other branded swag, for example. But again, I think if you are on a budget, and most of us are really on a very tight budget when we're starting out, please don't feel that you need to have all the stuff. Please don't feel you need to hire experts and professionals to do this work for you, because there definitely are ways that you can do it yourself or very, very cheaply. One of my favorite resources in terms of designing materials and graphics and stuff, and some of you might be familiar with this already, is Canva. I've written here in the bottom dot point there, CANVA, canva.com. Actually, amazingly, very proudly an Australian business, which is now a multi-billion dollar business globally, but started in Sydney. You can create all your marketing materials in Canva, everything from your business card to flyers to social media to memes to infographics to booklets to, you name it. It's pretty much kind of the world's your oyster there. It's a simple program to use. You can have a lot of fun with it. It is free, but there are advantages to having the paid or the sort of professional subscription, because when you have that, you can actually start to store in files things like your logo or your images, your branding palette. So what that means is when you've decided on the sort of the palette of colors that you're going to use in all your materials, and again, this really enhances your brand and the familiarity of your brand, because every time somebody sees that combination of teal and green and whatever it might be, they go, oh, I've seen that combination of colors and that logo before. It's becoming more and more familiar to me. You want to replicate that across all your materials, even down to what font you use in your email. Make sure that's the same font that you use in all your written communications. I know it sounds like almost a little bit over the top, but I guarantee you it's about building that brand, I suppose the brand experience. And again, wherever people are interacting with you, be it online, offline, whatever, that there's that kind of building of familiarity. So you know, as I said, this is not something you have to think you have to do all of this straight away, but there may be in the future as your business grows, there may be some things that you'd like to do. I thought I would put in a little bit of information about, I've talked, you know, in the last sort of few slides about, you know, the millennials and the Gen Zs and so forth. And there is some really interesting material out there which you can read, and I've included some articles, but certainly if it's an area that you kind of a bit more, you know, curious to kind of really get inside the head of, you know, I would say do all the research. You know, it's all going to benefit you ultimately in your business. So the first thing is, you know, when we talk about Gen Z, who are we talking about? Well, these are people who are currently somewhere between 16 and 25 years old. So they're on obviously the very younger end of our potential parents. I would say for people hiring a private doula, I would say at this stage, we are almost entirely talking about millennials. So they're people who are 25 to sort of 39 years old, roughly 20, 26, you know, there's a bit of crossover, but sort of mid to late 20s through to mid to late 30s. And because they're obviously people who are a little bit more established professionally, financially, and have, you know, the financial means to hire a doula. But look, in 5 years or so, these 25-year-olds are 30-year-olds, and so it's just very important to start thinking about who these people are, you know, and the generational, I suppose, influences and things that really make them tick, right? So not surprisingly, we know that very high percentage of them spend, you know, fair amount of time on things like Instagram and YouTube, also TikTok. TikTok much more so for Gen Z than millennials. Millennials are still Instagram, Facebook. That's their kind of go-tos. And the other thing that Gen Z is really kind of strongly associated with is their love of, you know, following influencers. And, you know, I'm thinking about my daughter. She's younger than this. She's 12. But, you know, I hear her talking about these people all the time. I'm like, who are these people? You know, that she's obsessed with, that she follows on TikTok and blah, blah, blah. So this is absolutely true. And we think about the pregnancy space as well. We think, you know, about your Kardashians and, you know, and other sort of celebs who have babies. And, you know, they are intensely followed online. And I don't know if that's entirely a good thing, but again, this is the reality of this generation. I think as well, the thing to be mindful of when we are talking about this sort of younger generation of parents is, first of all, that they are true digital natives, right? They do not have any memory of a time when you know, technology and instant access to information was literally not at the, you know, tap of a finger away. So this is what they've grown up with. But the thing that Gen Z really enjoys is visual content, and that is why we've seen the massive you know, skyrocketing success of TikTok. Not only is it visual, but it's short. And the other thing that we know about Gen Z is their attention span. This is quite shocking, but it is about 12 seconds. Millennials are slightly longer, 18 seconds, I think it is. So it's hard to maintain, you know, their interest and their attention span for very long. So TikTok is kind of like the perfect, the perfect medium for them. And as I said in the last slide, millennials do tend to prefer things like Facebook, you know, etc., or YouTube as well, and Instagram. So again, you know, who's your target audience and where are they? Where are they spending their time in terms of, you know, social media particularly? One thing I do want to point out about social media, and we could probably do an entire, you know, session just on social media alone, is I don't want you to feel pressured that you yourself need to be on TikTok or you need to be on Insta or wherever it is. You need to be where your clients are and where they're searching, but you also need to pick a medium or a platform that resonates with you and that feels natural for you. you know, as much as I know that I'm like, I probably should be on TikTok, I'm not on TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account. I think about it as something my 12 and 13-year-old children love, and I'm like, oh. Whereas I know that most of my clients are on Facebook or Instagram, and so that's where I tend to focus my attention. And also that's what I enjoy, you know, spending time on if I'm on social media. So don't feel you have to be everywhere all the time. First of all, there are not enough hours in the day for that. So pick your platform carefully. And as I said, make sure it's a platform that both reflects your target audience, but also is a platform that you feel comfortable sharing content on. Also, I think it's really important to have a combination of original content, so stuff you create yourself, as well as sharing other really good content as well. If you do share material, images, content, obviously please make sure that you attribute it properly. One thing that you might want to do, particularly if you kind of are on more than maybe one platform, is to use a scheduling app. Now, if you are literally just on Facebook and Instagram, then you might want to use something like Creator Studio. Now, this is an app which is developed by Facebook or Meta or whatever they're called now, because they own both Facebook and Instagram. So it's a very easy to use scheduling app where you basically create the content. You choose when you want to have it, you know, scheduled and go live on your platform. And you can do one for Insta and one for Facebook, or the same for both if you want to. And you can do a whole week's worth. You can plan a whole month's worth if you want to, and schedule the time that each of those posts will go live. If you're on TikTok or whatever, then or Reels, for example, even within Insta, you do need to do those live and, you know, within the app itself. So, but it can definitely help save some time, especially if you're a bit time poor and you need to kind of like, okay, Tuesday is my social media and my marketing day. I'm going to get everything done for the week or for the next couple of weeks done. So a tool like Creator Studio, which is free, can be really helpful. There's others too, some of which are paid, but this is a good one, as I said, if you're just using Facebook and Insta. This is something I think is really important to bring back specifically to our work as doulas, and there's some real do's and don'ts when it comes to social media etiquette. And I'll just obviously leave you some time just to read this yourself. But it's just really important to make sure that whatever you're posting, obviously you have permission to post. You got to know that if you're posting on behalf of your business, that you're representing your business. And so it's important that whatever you're posting reflects the values of your business. And, you know, so those sort of things, making sure that you are not sharing information or stories that are not yours to tell or to share. And also that you are, you know, ensuring that you're not outing clients by sharing privileged information and confidential information and things like that. And, you know, basically know that there's no such thing as private in social media. Even if it's in a closed group, a private group, there's nothing that can't be screenshot and then shared. And unfortunately, that has happened to many, many people. So, you know, I always sort of say to people, whatever you put on social media, imagine if you were happy to have it on the front page of the Age or the Herald Sun for the entire, you know, state to read, then put it on social media. If not, think twice about putting that out there. So have a read of that. But I think specifically for doulas, and certainly speaks to the ethics of our work, there's some important things to consider there. So one of the little exercises that I would love you guys to complete is something called a SWOT analysis. I'm not sure if any of you have come across this before, or, you know, you might have possibly done a SWOT analysis or read one in other areas of work that you might have done in the past. SWOT is an acronym and stands for, as you can see, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this is how a SWOT analysis is often visually represented, and you'll see a sort of version of this in the student workbook as well. The other thing that I have added here is you can see on the left-hand side, internal and external environment. Now, when you're doing a SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses are often what are considered to be the internal environment, meaning these are things that essentially you can control to a large degree. The business's strengths and the business's weaknesses, they're things internal to you as the business owner, or to the business if it's larger than just you. Whereas the opportunities and the threats are considered to be external factors and part of the external environment, because they're things that you fundamentally can't control or you have very little control over. We'll break down the SWOT and explain kind of what goes into it and how you complete that. As I said, it'd be great if you could complete your own SWOT as part of this week's session as well. Now, it is possible, to do both a business SWOT and a personal SWOT. Now, given that you actually haven't launched your businesses yet, you might actually want to do a personal SWOT for the purposes of this exercise, and that's totally fine. The difference is obviously that a business SWOT is very kind of objective. It's looking at the business and the strengths of the businesses, the weaknesses of the business, where there are market opportunities and potential to grow the business. What are the things that could potentially impact the business, or that things that could sink a business ultimately as well. A personal SWOT analysis, however, is very subjective. It's about evaluating your own personal strengths and weaknesses. It's about considering what some of those external factors that you could either take advantage of or that you should be potentially preparing for in terms of possible threats to growing, I suppose, your business, but essentially that more perhaps your personal goals. When I go through the next few slides, I'm viewing it through the lens of a personal SWOT, because I think that might be a little bit easier for you guys to relate to at this stage. So I'm going to start with strengths. And remember, this exercise we're looking at as a personal SWOT analysis. So in terms of considering your strengths, and I would say when you're filling in the SWOT, the boxes, feel free, as this slide has, just to include dot points. You don't need to write, fully, fleshed out paragraphs or pages or anything like that. It's meant to be short and sweet and to the point. So your strengths include things that you are good at naturally, and they don't need to be specifically to speaking to your skills as a doula. Any professional training, certifications, things that make you stand out from the rest. Any natural talents or gifts or skills, your network, what do other people see as your strengths, etc. Now, when I say stand out from the rest, I've put it in that bolded box here as being really important, because when it comes to being a doula, yes, of course, there are more experienced and less experienced doulas out there. There are doulas who did this training and doulas who did that training, and some people might view this certification as being more valuable than another one. But overall, there's not a whole lot which is differentiating you from any other doula. So you've got to really think about what makes me different, what makes me kind of stand out. And so it might be that you're a multilingual doula, it might be that you have skills and training and experience in particular areas like postpartum support, or that you bring other services offerings to your package that kind of, make you a bit of a one-stop shop for people. So think about that. And when you do later on your competitor analysis, that will be a really helpful tool for you to work out what makes you stand out. The second part of the SWOT analysis is weaknesses, right? And again, being a personal SWOT, thinking about you rather than the business. So think about, you know, are there things that you could kind of improve when it comes to your work habits? Do you feel that there is training or skills that, you know, if you undertook would really improve your potential, your business potential? You know, areas that you feel, you know, currently you might be lacking, but, you know, essentially if you had would really make a good sort of positive difference. And look, it's important to be really honest and also realistic about answering these questions. It's not for anybody else's eyes but your own. And so a little bit of, you know, I think just honest self-reflection is really helpful, because you'll ultimately, this is for you to use as a way to identify where you build on and where you can improve, and how you can really build, you know, ultimately a thriving, successful, sustainable business. So O is for opportunities. I love this quote at the top from Thomas Edison. We often miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work, right? And I think that's so true. Sometimes, you know, it really is the grunt work that is where the opportunities are found. And also that building a business, and as I said earlier, a doula business is no different to any other business, is sometimes just really hard work that takes a while, that is not glamorous, that doesn't earn a whole lot of money in the beginning. There'll be probably many, many, many times when you're like, why am I doing this? Why did I think this was a good idea? And that's normal. And if you weren't thinking those things or feeling those things, I would be a bit concerned, because I think that that's really, really normal. So, you know, building any business simply takes time and a lot of hard work. And one of the things I think I would be really, really wary of, and unfortunately there are no shortage of sort of, to be honest, sort of charlatans out there in the business world. Even in our area, in our business, there are people who are, you know, kind of have these, you know, whether it's webinars or online courses, or they'll hook you in with a freebie this, and then, you know, you kind of, you feel pressured into signing up for something, you know, with the promise of, you know, if you do this course, if you complete this thing, you know, I guarantee that, you know, you'll be earning, you know, 6 figures in the first year of your business, blah, blah, blah. Anybody who's making kind of grandiose, you know, promises like that, I would run for the hills, you know, from as fast as possible. There is no quick fix. There is no, I think, hard and fast rules or written guarantee that, you know, you do X, Y, and Z and boom, you've got a successful business, or, you know, or that you can achieve certain results in a finite amount of time. You know, everybody's circumstances are different. So going back to opportunities, you know, this is in that external sort of environment that we were talking about before. And sometimes your strength and your opportunities match, right? You're really good at this, and now there's an opportunity to upskill or improve or build on, and you're like, wow, that's just like a marriage made in heaven, right? So, but also thinking with that external perspective and lens on, think about what is going on economically, what's going on in the birth world, in the doula industry, in women's understanding of the role of doulas. Is there demand for doula services growing in your area? Certainly COVID, you know, as I said, not, you know, it wasn't all bad. I think one of the silver linings for COVID was it really drew attention to the importance of continuous support in labor, and support post-birth as well. And so the role of the doula, the growing awareness of what doulas do, really, really increased during COVID and post-COVID. So definitely this is a period of growth in this industry. There's no doubt about it. I don't see it declining. I see it only growing. And so these are things to be aware of, thinking about those market forces and those opportunities to grow the business now that there is an increased awareness of what we do. So finally, the final component of the SWOT is T for threats. And again, this is external. So these are not necessarily things that we can control. And whether you're doing a personal SWOT or a business SWOT, these are the sort of things that you're thinking about. So is there a lot of competition? Are there a lot of other doulas in your area or offering very similar services to what you're offering? Going back to your weaknesses, are those weaknesses somehow inhibiting your ability to grow the business? What was the biggest what do you feel is the biggest external threat to meeting your goals? Are there new are there trainings or professional development opportunities that you think by not having are somehow impeding your progress? Do you feel, and this could go back to being a weakness, but is for example, is a weakness that you are really not tech savvy, that you hate social media, that you're feeling very overwhelmed with the prospect of having to write and build and design a website. So, compared with doulas who have beautiful websites, that is a weakness, but also a threat, right? So the point I've made here in the box at the bottom is an important one to think about. So one of the easiest ways to eliminate a threat is to overcome a personal or professional weakness. So I've used this example here. Your competition does a great job marketing their services. They're all over social media. Their branding is really strong. So if marketing is not your strong suit, find out where you can gain valuable marketing skills that will help give your business the competitive edge that it needs. So again, you don't need to go off to uni and do a degree in marketing. Look at your council services, look at the networking opportunities, the free webinars. There's a lot out there. YouTube, YouTube has got like a gazillion tutorials and if you sign up for Canva's got some fantastic videos on branding, and it's taking you step by step. So it's time consuming. That's what I was saying earlier on the previous slide. A successful business isn't born overnight. It takes time, and it takes time also to evolve and develop into your own business, for you to actually create your own branding and your own unique voice. And it is purely trial and error and experience and longevity in your business that will, over time, you and your brand, you are one and the same, because I said you are your business, right? So you can't ultimately sort of try and push from the get-go yourself as something you are not. Fundamentally, it is not who you are at your core. We throw around the word, your authentic self probably way too much, and it sounds a little bit cliched, but it is true. You do need to be your authentic self, because people do see through, to be honest, pardon my French, but BS. People see through it, and they know that there's just something not quite right about it. So, you may not be all things to all people, but none of us are. But you will be the perfect thing for that particular client who is looking for you, and you tick all her boxes. And that is really what we're talking about when we talk, about who your ideal client is. It is a perfect match of philosophy, of approach, of values, etc. And that is, kind of a marriage made in heaven when it happens. So we're going to talk a little bit about competition, or your competitors, and a little bit of information that will just help you to complete that competitor analysis, which is one of the other activities for this week. So, thinking about when we talk about competition, what are we talking about? So obviously talking about competition for business, right? So there are direct competitors. So that is other doulas, right? Doing what you do, offering the same or very similar services to you. There are other sort of indirect competitors as well. So people may find that, they have heard about independent midwives. So they have decided to go with a private midwife over a doula. Or they've done a really good childbirth education course and they feel like, they've kind of got this, right? The partner is feeling that they've kind of learnt the skills they need to provide all the labor support that they feel is needed. So they may have done a course and thought, oh, well, yeah, I think we're good, just the two of us. Student midwives who have to do the follow through as well, that is, I see quite frequently women posting saying, they're pregnant and they're looking for a student midwife to provide them with support because it's free. Right? And that also might be student doulas. I know that there are some doula training organizations who, in order to get sort of certified or qualified through that organization, need to provide a number of free births in order to do that. And so, some people ask for student doulas, or their training organization kind of provide the entree, and so actually pregnant women go through something like the Australian Doula College, for example, and then ADC actually will refer them to a student doula. So there's that kind of competition. And then there's emerging competitors, so people who are not quite your competition yet, but they'll be the new doulas coming through, or people offering, setting up in your area. Suddenly there's more doulas. You were the only one for a while and now there's 4 of you. So thinking about that. And the next page is, I won't do a video around it, but it's just, I would like you then to maybe, if you like, pause or, just come back to this later. But it's to look at that competitor analysis and maybe pick 2-3 other doulas here in Melbourne, do some research on them, what they offer, where they are, what the services, what their costs are, etc. And then sort of look at kind of what's out there in the marketplace. So just a couple of other final notes about the competitor analysis. So I've linked here actually Xero, which is the accounting software, actually have a really good guide on how to do a competitor analysis. So you might want to just check that out before you do yours. And there's also this other link from Global Victoria, and they've got some quite good tips on how to conduct a competitor analysis as well. So you might want to read them before, but you don't have to. But if you just sort of want a little bit more of a broader understanding of what a good analysis includes, then you might want to check them out first. This slide here is just lists a number of other possible platforms where you can kind of get your message out there, and other ways that you can kind of build a following, grow awareness of who you are, your business, etc. So they include things like sending out a monthly newsletter, or however frequently you would choose to do that. Blogging, as we've talked about earlier, and blogging can be a great way to build audience and awareness. I think about somebody like oh gosh, let me think, Dr. Sarah Wickham from the UK, or Dr. Rachel Reed, who's here in Australia. When you sort of follow them on social media, you sign up through their website to make sure that you get their latest blogs. A lot of people, in this space are just sort of super eager to what's the new Rachel Reed blog about, so that's something to consider. Vlogging is another thing, so using something like YouTube is a great way to get your message and your thoughts across. But you could use Instagram, like Reels, Facebook stories, TikTok, obviously. So there's lots of visual video platforms to do that. And finally, podcasting. And I have to say that even though, it sort of seems like everybody's got a podcast these days, it seems to be a platform that consumers kind of cannot get enough of. It's important to do your research. It's really important to, particularly if you're thinking about doing a sort of pregnancy related, parenting related podcast, do your market research, find out what currently is out there, and then work out what is not being produced, what is not currently out there in that space, and then create something that really, kind of hits that spot and is answering a void in the market. So podcasting, again, if it's something completely new to you, don't just jump off the deep end with it. There are lots of tutorials. Again, go to YouTube. There are courses you can do, paid courses, but I would hazard a guess that you could probably get an awful lot of information on how to start a podcast for free. You don't need a lot of expensive equipment. And you might want to buddy up with another doula or another birth worker and actually co-present a podcast. You might want to interview people each time. So anyway, another thing to think about. Of course, there's the time consideration. All these things take time, right? And you have to work out how much, in reality, how much spare time you actually have. But these are all great ways to really, as I said, expand your presence and an awareness of who you are, and your sort of your footprint, if you like, in the digital space. So this slide might, on the surface, seem a little bit dry and dull, but bear with me. Stay with me. So community profiling and market research. Okay, so there's a couple of websites here which you can go and check out. There's the ABS, right, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Obviously, they are the organisation that is responsible for the census. And then you've got the ABS community profiles. So within their website, they have these things called community profiles. What community profiles are actually really fascinating, and very, very useful, tidbits of information. If you are, you've sort of identified kind of in your head who you sort of feel instinctively is your target audience, you can learn a lot about people from these community profiles, and there is a surprisingly detailed amount of information, not obviously personal information, but demographic information, but it's much more than beyond age, ethnicity, place of birth. It's actually really, you can almost go down a rabbit hole with this stuff because it's very, very interesting. You'll see when you perhaps use the PDF version of these slides, you can click on things like the Market Research Kit. That's a really good resource I found from Business Queensland. It is tailored obviously for Queensland-based businesses, but you could certainly adapt that for more of a local Melbourne I suppose situation. And then also local government areas have also produced very detailed population reports and data reports. So I've used, for example, one from northwestern Melbourne, and there's another one which I've used from Western Sydney, which is actually really interesting. If you're interested in working with new immigrant populations, then again, checking out the community profiles, understanding that population on many, many levels is really helpful, because then you ultimately know how to communicate to these people, how to market to them. Okay. So have a look at that. I promise you that it's actually far more interesting, actually pretty fascinating once you kind of get into it, than what on the surface might seem to be deadly dull. So this slide here is going to help get you thinking about one of the other little activities or assignments for this session, and that is, you'll see as well another table in your workbook. It's on page 88. It says defining your target market. Who exactly is my ideal client? So these are some, quite kind of marketing sort of heavy terminology, if you like, so don't get put off by that. But we often talk about what's known as a broad market segment and then a defined market segment. So basically all that means is the broad market segments are really very broad, not well-defined aspects of, target population. So are we talking men and women? Are we talking teenagers? Are we talking, retirees? Are we talking about, blue collar, working class populations? Or are we talking about, your Toorak, South Yarra, white collar, higher socioeconomic population, first-time parents, etc. So these are broad market segmentation. The defined market is when you kind of start to drill down a little bit, and that's where you have much more interesting information. And to be honest, is really when you're talking about defining a target market, you need to drill down to understand them on a much more on a much deeper level, if you like. So these include things like, deeper demographics, geographic, where are they living, what kind of housing are they living in? Is it rented? Is it owner occupied? Is it public housing? The psychographic is your client's personal interests. The buyer motives, actually we'll cover that in the next slide a little bit more, and subsequently what we call the buyer decision-making process. What's going on mentally in your client's head as they go from, finding your website right through to signing the contract with you. That doesn't happen in a nanosecond. There is a whole process that person goes on, the journey, if you like, and that is what we call the buyer decision-making process. So we need to kind of break that down a little bit and understand that. The consumer or your potential client's reaction to your services, your products, when they read your website, when they see you on social media, what do they take from that? What do they understand from what it is you are communicating? What vibe do they get? What does their instinct tell them about you? So you sort of, as you can see, as you drill down on this sort of almost minutiae of detail, this ephemeris kind of almost, faceless target market suddenly becomes a person. And when you've got a person in your head and you understand who she is, where she shops, what she's looking at online, where she, even politically, how she's aligned, you are going to be able to communicate so much more effectively to her than if you have no understanding of her. And all you know is she's female, she's 25 to 39 years old, she has a university degree, and it's her first baby. That's a lot of people, right? So we need to understand people on a much deeper level in order to know how to really communicate to them effectively. So this is that buyer decision-making process I mentioned on the previous slide. As I said, from when somebody has, even before, let's go a stage back, before they've come across your website or your Insta page or whatever it might be, your client has found out she's pregnant, or she might be halfway through the pregnancy right now, and she's heard lots of her friends talk about these doula people, right? What's a doula? So she might start by doing a little bit of research about just doulas in general, or she was listening to Australian Birth Stories podcast and heard a wonderful story about somebody who had a doula and they had this amazing positive experience. So she hears doula, doula, doula from a number of different sources, and she's like, maybe I'll think about having a doula, right? So there's that pre-stage, which here is stage one. It's the need, the want, the desire. She's recognized that, maybe I could enhance this experience. So stage 2 is that information search, right? She's starting to do research, listen to podcasts, Google stuff about doulas, talk to her friends a little bit. Then stage 3 is evaluation of the alternatives. So she's now kind of drilling down and going, okay, well, I really like the look of this doula, and this doula. I really like their website. I've seen their prices, and I can afford these people. They're all kind of in the same ballpark. They all seem to have similar amount of experience, and I kind of, they sort of seem to be people that I would connect with. So what's the next stage, right? What is that crux between choosing you or someone else? And that's stage 4. That's the decision making is where that takes place. This is somewhere between stage 3 and stage 4 is your doula meet and greet, hopefully, where they get to know you, chat with you on the phone, do a Zoom, have a coffee, for example. You send them that information which bolsters what you've shared with them. So it might be your doula welcome pack, for example, or you direct them to something on your website where there's more information. And, because you've done a really good competitor analysis, that, you're the only doula, in that area who offers this or has this special package or, offers something, that's a unique value add, for example. So hopefully based on that, they've then decided to go with you. And that's not where it ends. The signing and the providing of your services to that client, end of story. As we've discussed previously, doula work, like many birth work professions, is such a powerfully word of mouth business. What we hope will happen is that client will have had a really wonderful, really memorable experience having you support her and maybe her partner through, this enormous transformational life stage, that, she will start telling her friends and her work colleagues and her relatives about, her amazing doula, right? And then you might get a call from someone who says, "Oh, my friend Jennifer had a baby last year, and you were her doula, and she recommended you." Right? So this is where we're going to start. This is that post-purchase behavior, right? We're going to hopefully get more business from these people, indirectly, because they've referred you to other friends. So this is that cycle, right? And so there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes, both psychologically and behaviorally, that go into ultimately you getting the business and having a sustainable business where you will get more and more referrals as time goes on. So it is helpful, again, to sort of have a little bit of an insight into the psychology behind the buyer decision-making process. And this is our final slide. First of all, I want to thank you. If you have watched this all in one go, your attention span is epic, and you're probably not a Gen Z person. So thank you for staying with me on this. I know I've thrown an enormous amount of information at you. Hopefully you've done, the smart thing, and you've just stopped and paused and done this bit by bit. But this is I just wanted to finish up here with, asking you the question. So who is your ideal client? Okay. It's really important that, in the same way that each client that you will support is unique, you are also unique. Your services and who you are and what you bring as a doula is unique. And you will not be all things to all people. You don't want to be all things to all people. You want to be the right thing for the right people. And, sometimes you will meet people at a meet and greet, and your instinct is telling you, she's not my person. One little bit of wisdom I hope I can share with you is, when you're a new doula and you're kind of really hungry for business and you feel like you need to take on every client that comes your way, let me tell you, you do not. And in fact, if your gut is telling you, sometimes screaming at you, this ain't my person, this is not my client, it's okay to to decline. It's not a one-way street. It's not they have to say yes to me, right? You have to say yes to them too. It's a mutual, that's why it's a meet and greet. You have to try each other on for size, okay? So if you walk away from that, I always tell people, never make a decision on the spot. Go home. If you have a partner, talk with your partner, look over the material, give me a call in a couple of days if you've got more questions or whatever. And that saves you as well, like them saying, oh yes, we'd love you to be our doula, because then you're really on the spot and you're like, oh, I'd love to be your doula, right? There's none of that if you really put it on, out there from the beginning. This is not about making a decision. This is purely a let's get to know each other opportunity. If you walk away from that and went, something's NQR about this, not quite right, you've got some red flags, you've got some concerns, listen to your instinct. Now, we're always telling our pregnant clients, to do the BRAIN acronym, right? Benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition. Use your intuition, and recognize that not all clients are suited to you. And I look, I think all doulas kind of learn this lesson the hard way, so I'm kind of trying to prevent you from learning a really awful lesson. But sometimes we do take clients that our gut tells us we really shouldn't, and they're more often than not pretty disastrous outcomes in terms of the relationship, in terms of the just that overall experience, which often can leave you feeling pretty awful about yourself, pretty awful about the experience, pretty awful about even being a doula sometimes in extreme situations. So if you can avoid that, do yourself a favor. And what you should feel when you walk away from meeting a potential client is just that same way your gut's telling you, oh, I really connected with that person, I really love that couple, and I can see myself at their birth. You literally can almost see yourself there. And then surprise, not surprised, you get a call or an email from them and a day or two later going, we loved meeting you, we'd really love you to be our doula, what's the next step? Okay. And you're just like, yes, you feel wonderful about it because you're like, yes, it was a mutual thing. So take some time, do that kind of little exercise in the workbook about defining that ideal client. Because once you've got that, then you can go back to this website, go back to the copy on the content on your website, decide what kind of additional content you're putting on social media. You're going to decide what platforms on social media you're going to use. You're going to determine your branding, your color scheme, the images on your website. All of it stems from having a deep, intimate understanding of who it is you're trying to attract. So you can kind of see it's this chicken egg thing, right? So that's why I think do the homework, and if you can, do something like a niche course, do a business course, spend the time working on your business plan, your financial plan, your marketing plan, and just do all that hard work and lay the groundwork for what hopefully will be a really successful, thriving and viable business for the long term. So that's my hope for you all. And also just want to finally, I guess, extend, any ongoing support or questions that you might have that relate to marketing and business. Like, obviously you have my details and you're really welcome to reach out to me anytime. I hope you found this session interesting and useful. It may not be super relevant right now. You may sort of park this and come back to it in 6 months. But hopefully the information will be there for you when you need it. So thank you. As I said, thank you again for enduring through 2 3/4 of an hour with this session.